Right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Hennepin-University Partnership webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Food Skills and Food Waste, Mapping the Evidence for Effective Community Interventions, and is presented by a HUP project team. My name is Margaret Stumbo-Turvey, and I'm a senior project manager with the Hennepin-University Partnership. The Hennepin-University Partnership is a collaboration between Minnesota's most populous county and its only land-grant university. At HUP, we're dedicated to catalyzing and supporting mutually beneficial relationships. The partnership has led to over 500 joint projects, combining academic research and local expertise to inform policy and practice for the benefit of Hennepin County residents. The goals of this webinar series are to offer information exchange and showcase research. We hope today's session is both accessible and informative for people with varying levels of familiarity with the topic. Before we get started, a few Zoom reminders for our audience. Your video and audio are not enabled, so if you need any support from the HUP team, please use the chat or the Q&A function. If you'd like to ask a question of our panelists, you can also submit that through the Q&A function. We will monitor questions throughout and save time to address them at the end. Today's webinar is being recorded, so please look for an email from hup@umn.edu with a survey and a link to the recorded webinar video tomorrow. And finally, I'm so glad to welcome and introduce the presenters. Jenny Kedward is a researcher focused on food systems, sustainability, and waste reduction. Her work explores consumer behaviors related to food use and waste, with an emphasis on translating research into practical community-level strategies. Abby Gold is a public health researcher whose work focuses on food systems, nutrition, and health equity. She studies how food-related knowledge and skills shape health and environmental outcomes with the goal of informing evidence-based interventions and policy. Aisha Baltachi is an assistant extension professor and 4-H healthy living specialist in the Department of Youth Development at the University of Minnesota. Her research and extension work focus on community nutrition, food security, and positive parenting practices to promote health and well-being among youth. And now I will turn it over to the team for their presentation.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm Jenny Kedward, she, her pronouns, and I represent the Hennepin County side of this as your food waste prevention specialist. Today, we're going to talk about what we did introductions, but we'll go through research goals, why we're doing this, and then dive into the methodology, results, and discussion questions that the results brought up. And of course, how we're going to use this the results in our programming. And we will have time for Q&A. Next slide. Okay, so we know in my world, wasted food is a big problem. In the US, nearly 40% of all of our food is thrown away, uneaten, tossed, maybe composted, but still 40%. We know this is a big deal, and we want to address this at Hennepin County. Next slide. And if you're a visual person, it's really hard to understand like how much wasted food that is. 40%, like that's devastating to hear, but like what does that really mean? Well, based on our own studies of just Hennepin County waste, we throw away enough edible food, things we could have eaten but didn't. We throw enough edible food away to fill Target Field 1.5 times each year, which is ridiculous. Next slide. And even if we composted all of that, which we definitely want we want everyone to be able to compost and divert to animals or organics recycling in some way, we want to keep it out of the trash. But even if we did all of that, we know based on many research studies that we're still wasting all of the resources that went into growing our food. So the cropland, the fresh water, the fertilizers, the labor, the transportation, it's all wasted when we don't eat our food. Next slide. So with that, Hennepin County knows that preventing wasted food is critical for our climate action goals, zero waste goals, and disparity reduction. Because when we're throwing away good food, we're also not feeding people that could use it. Next slide. So with that, government, we love a good plan. We have many plans that back up this work. To meet our climate action goals, zero waste goals, we have to look at food. Food is by far the #1 thing in our trash. So we created, and it's been over a year now since we've had it, the Wasted Food Prevention Plan, which aligns all of our goals of we are going to cut edible wasted food in half in all waste streams. So that includes our composting too. Yes, we want to compost, but if we can get that food eaten, that's our number one goal. And the strategies that align in the goal to this research are in most of our residential programs, but also in our schools as well, to educate residents on using up their food, increasing kitchen skills, their kitchen confidence. And because those are strategies in our plan, before we spend money and time in backing up these strategies, we really wanted to understand, is there a correlation between increasing our kitchen skills and confidence and that decrease in wasted food? So we wanted to do our due diligence, and that's what this whole study is about. Next slide. And so I will leave you with that of why we wanted to do the study, and I'm so pleased at the methodology and results of the study. And I'll come back at the end of how we're going to use the results of the study. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. And also thank you for this great opportunity. It was a big learning experience for our research team, but also several students that got to work on the research. And what we aimed to do was conduct a scoping review. And a scoping review is another type of review of the research literature where you're looking at what is the general literature telling us about this particular topic or phenomena. And so we developed a couple aims for the research. And the first aim was to identify the skills and behaviors associated with a reduction in household level food waste. And one thing I learned from you, Jenny, was we want to kind of reframe the way we talk about food waste and say wasted food instead. And it seems to have kind of that psychological impact if you kind of turn that phrase around. So identifying the skills and behaviors associated with wasted food at the household level. And then the second aim was to identify skills and behaviors that are applicable to the context of urban environments, specifically Hennepin County, in the US, upon which we can create a community-based program or intervention. And that's the thing we do really well here in Extension at the University of Minnesota. So Aisha is going to talk about how we conducted the scoping review.
Thanks, Abby. Thanks for Jenny for being here and for being part of this project. It was a great experience for me too. And as Abby mentioned, like we use scoping review methodology to map all the evidence related to how food skills and behaviors influence wasted food in households. And we follow the Prisma framework, which includes 6 steps. And our first step was determining our research questions. So we had 2 research questions. One was, what is the relationship between individual food skills and behaviors and household level wasted food? And then our second one is kind of narrow it down, which food skills and behaviors are primary in the prevention of household level food waste. So we looked for answering these questions throughout the study. So next slide. So our librarian, Megan Kocher, she found all the literature for us using multiple databases, like including Scopus and Web of Science and all these like different platforms. And then we used Covidence for article selection process. So Covidence is a systematic review software that helps researchers screen articles through multiple stages, like including title and abstract screening, and then full text review and data extraction. And after that, we got extracted data. We created all the questions, our team and Jenny, we created the questions, what we want to know about this topic. And then we answered all these questions in the data extraction process in the Covidence. We filled out this like spreadsheet. And then after that, we used thematic analysis to compare, summarize, and report the findings. Next slide. And you can see this is the table including our inclusion and exclusion criteria. For inclusion criteria, we selected only research articles. We eliminated review articles and also like conference proceedings. And then we also selected the articles who like the ones, the primary outcome is the wasted food, household level wasted food, and also examined the like food skills, any kind of food skills and behaviors related to wasted food. And we also excluded the articles focusing on different level of food waste, like you can see here the big list like school or institution, like healthcare, hospital, all these kind of level of wasted food, like we kind of excluded from our articles. And you can see this is a nice figure from Covidence. So like when you use Covidence, it gives you this Prisma flow chart. Like it actually maps out everything you did like throughout the process. So you can see here like the identification stage, like we found a lot of articles. Like you can see here like more than 7,000. But after like checking out like duplicates, all these like the exclusion criterias, we narrowed down to like 3,102 studies. We started with that many studies to screen. Our first step was like looking at the titles and abstracts to look for like the key terms, like our main outcomes. And we had a like group of students, and Abby and I included, like we were like nine people or maybe little more. We did all the process together. And then we like two people did this process, and then if there's a conflict, like we check the articles and then kind of like finalize it, which way is the best way to handle it. And then after that, you can see like at the end we ended up like 50 studies, but it was a long process, and it was a lot of conversations, a lot of discussions. And you can also see in the like the Prisma flow chart, like why we eliminated some of the studies. Like you can see everything in this one, like mapping out in the chart. So it's very nice. And next slide.
Aisha, do you want to say something about the studies had to have the outcome data as
The yeah, definitely. So we had some studies mentioned, like for example, there were a lot of studies examining for like the food wasted food related factors, but not the primary outcome wasn't the wasted food. Like for example, they examined the kind of like attitudes toward like food skills to reduce food waste. But the direct outcome wasn't the wasted food. So we eliminated all these articles because we had a lot of it. Like for example, knowledge or perception of the like waste, like the skill, like perception of the food waste association to like skills. Kind of it was very complicated in the beginning because we got a lot of paper from a lot of different fields, not just nutrition and food and public health. Like there were a lot of different kinds of papers out there, and then they examined the different aspects of the wasted food or this different factors, or kind of like not directly examining the wasted food, but you can see like it start like the title or abstract mentioning about wasted food a lot, and then you kind of like feel okay, that's the paper we're looking for. And then when you read the entire paper, when you start the extraction process, you see this is not directly examining the wasted food, like this is examining the factors, but those factors can help reducing wasted food. So we had a lot of these kind of papers. So that's why we ended up just 50 papers, but we focused on primarily the ones looking for the association between the food skills and behaviors to wasted food, household level wasted food. Yeah. So
Thank you, Aisha. Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
So yes, all of the papers that we chose to include in the scoping review had to connect the behaviors and the skills to the outcome of wasted food. If that wasn't present, then those studies were booted out of our scoping review to get to our results. And we ended up with 50 studies, so from 7,000 to 50. And what we found were these emerging themes. There were 6 of them. And then those themes, of course, were divided into sub-themes. And of those sub-themes, we had further divided them into skills and behaviors, so specific skills and behaviors. I apologize, those are probably very tiny words on your screen, but I'm going to go through them in the upcoming slides here. So the original 6 themes that emerged from the literature was around planning, where we looked at skills and behaviors that were used for food acquisition, and then procurement, and that's the skills and behaviors used to acquire food, and then storage and management. So this is after food has been acquired, but then before it's been prepared and cooked. And then preparation and cooking. So the skills needed during cooking and while preparing to cook. And then, of course, consumption is what are the influences about how people consume food, as well as the context in which they consume it. And then, very importantly, leftover management and wastage. And so let's break this down even a little bit more. So let's first talk about that planning stage. And within the planning stage, you have budgeting and financial awareness and meal planning. And then if you go under meal planning, you've got these specific skills. And so you've got planning meals in advance of cooking. And then the opposite of that is not making shopping plans. We all know what happens when you don't make a shopping plan. And then under procurement, we've got the sub-themes of shopping frequency and quantities that you purchase, and then shopping strategies. So here you see the skills and behaviors under shopping frequency and quantity include a high or a low shopping frequency, impulse purchasing and bulk purchasing, purchasing discounted foods, and then high weekly spending. And these numbers in parentheses indicate the number of times that we saw this sub-skill or this skill identified. And so in the case of impulse purchasing and bulk purchasing, it was mentioned in 15 papers. Under shopping strategy, of course, is shopping list and purchasing for convenience. So under storage and management, we've got storage techniques and the skills related to that are preserving foods and the different practices we use. And also really importantly is food inventory management. And you see this number 16, this is a very high number mentioned in 16 papers. Food product date literacy, we all know how this has been talked about a lot, but we don't see it mentioned as much as we think it is mentioned. So still important, but not as highly identified as, say, food inventory management. And then under preparation and cooking, you've got lack of cooking planning, and that could lead to too much cooking. And then you have cooking habits and skills, which include eating at home, effective cooking skills, trying new recipes, and just having the confidence to cook. Under consumption, you've got consumption context, and what is consumed. And you see here, you've got the frequency of eating out of the home and consuming healthy foods, including fresh fruits and vegetables. And this was something, just as a dietitian and nutritionist, that I was actually very interested in examining the connection between healthy nutritional patterns and food waste. And so there we did see it mentioned, but not that frequently. And under leftover management, it's just leftover handling wastage and then how we use our leftovers. So those are the general skills that we identified. And then what we did was we categorized those sub-skills, the 37 of them, as being either food waste generators or food waste inhibitors. So for food waste generators, what you want to do is think of these skills and behaviors as demonstrating a positive association with food waste. That is, food waste or wasted food was increased. And we found 13 wasted food generators in terms of the behaviors. So we won't necessarily call those skills, we'll call them behaviors. And then under food waste inhibitors, these are skills and behaviors that demonstrate a negative association with wasted food. And so these were associated with a reduction in food waste. And we found 21 behaviors and skills that were associated with food waste inhibitors. So what do we do with all of this information? What we said was, after we categorized the food skills and behaviors as either inhibitors or generators of wasted food, we looked at how frequently they were mentioned in the literature. And so those little numbers in parentheses that were next to each skill and identified or behavior identified were, if they were low frequency, then they had a up to 3. They were identified up to 3 times. And so in this category, we found 10 skills and behaviors that generated food waste and 15 inhibitors that reduced wasted food. And the thing here to keep note of is that these were low frequency in terms of the papers that we read through and identified. They weren't mentioned as much as the high frequency skills and behaviors. And so this is where we kind of had to make a decision about, what was really important. Like if you were going to be developing a strategy or an intervention to help people in the community reduce their household wasted food, where would you focus your energy? And so this is where we really wanted to provide Hennepin County with some good recommendations for what are some of the like high frequency skills and behaviors that they could focus on in either their social media messaging or in any classes that they wanted to develop, or in their materials that they would send out to Hennepin County residents. And so this is very small, but what we found for the high frequency generators and inhibitors are the following. So for impulse purchasing and bulk purchasing, we found that was a high number of papers identified this as generators of wasted food. And so something that maybe Hennepin County wants to focus on. For the inhibitors, using a shopping list, food and inventory management, and then using leftovers. Those were the 3 top inhibitors of household wasted food from the papers that we identified.
So I'm gonna take over from here. So now we just wanna give you some overview of nuances of our data. Like we talked about 50 studies, and there are a lot of studies, and those are the high frequency mentioned, like like the inhibitors and generators, and also we talk about low, less mentioned like behaviors and skills and all these things. But we also identify some other things in our data, like for example, um, we know like theory-based public health interventions have higher rates of success, right? Like there are a lot of interventions out there, like following or framing like some of the theory or like framework, like using frameworks. But we only like in among the 50 studies, we only had two intervention studies under like were theory based. In general, like we only had like five or six studies were intervention studies. Like rest of them were only focusing on like looking for the association between the food skills and behaviors and wasted food in household level. So in those two intervention studies, both used motivation, ability, and opportunity framework. And based on this, and also like in our like general knowledge of the importance of theory and frameworks into interventions, we believe like the motivation, ability, and opportunity framework provides an excellent model for designing future interventions. It allows us to target three critical areas, like first, giving participants the motivation to reduce food waste. Second, teaching them the practical skills, abilities to change their behaviors. And then finally, creating the structural opportunities they need better manage their food supplies. So this is an example, like as a framework, but the Hennepin County or any places like creating an intervention related to food skills and behaviors and wasted food reduction household level. There are other frameworks they can focus on, but we just wanted to mention like the frameworks are important for the effectiveness of the interventions in this finding. Next slide. And also another limitation we found in this topic area is the only five studies involved in the United States, like only five studies conducted in the United States. When we think about like the research world and all these like important and big studies, and we are kind of leading the world like in a lot of different topic areas. So I think like it's good to determine this and maybe working on it in the future, like giving suggestions to professionals and researchers to focus on like wasted food, related research. So we analyzed studies from all over the world. Like we just wanted to see what's out there, like what kind of food skills and behaviors other researchers examining, and seeing if there is any association and all these things. And then it gave us opportunity to compare and contrast the similarities and differences of food skills and behaviors related to wasted food. But at the same time, it was also challenging for us to respond our second question, the kind of like which food skills and behavior, like it also kind of like was hard for us to generalize these findings for the US population in here. Because it was just like all over the world, and then we see a lot of like similar patterns, similar food skills and behaviors people examining, but at the same time we need more evidence for the United States to make like stronger foundation for the interventions and studies. So based on this, my takeaway is to like suggesting researchers and professionals focusing on the like doing more research about the food skills and behaviors, especially the ones wasn't examined before, like one time or two time or three times, to examine those associations in the future to contribute to intervention design and like behavioral change. And then the last one is we had we had some studies combined skills and behaviors when they examined the association between food skills and behaviors and wasted food, household level wasted food. So it was kind of nice to see like the combination effect on the food wasted food reduction and prevention, but at the same time it was hard for us to like kind of understand which one is the like primary to prevent wasted food in household level. And in general, like moving forward, like an important future direction would be testing highly examined, like most examined, like we showed you, like there were four food skills and behaviors like examined many, many times, like creating an intervention and measuring their effect on household level. But it would be great to examine them separately and also maybe combination to see like differences, which one is the most important. Because I know like we can focus on different food skills and behaviors in interventions, but it's not possible for us to focus on everything at once. So maybe like other like areas they want to focus on only one skill or two skills or three skills. Like it would be nice to know like which ones are the one like the primary, or which ones are the ones most effective, like maybe easier for people to focus on and prevent or like decrease the wasted food in households. So this was another takeaway from us. And in general, like the studies we examined relied on surveys and interviews in the papers. And we also found a lot of papers only looking for descriptive statistics, like which means like they only, like for example, they created a survey and ask all these bunch of questions about like the food skills and behaviors, or like what type of food wasted, like kind of questions, and then they only reported the like the survey responses, like how many people responded this question, like how many people said yes or no, or like all these kind of things, but they didn't do like statistical tests like correlation or other tests like to examine the association between food waste and the food skills and behaviors. So we didn't include those studies in our study. We only included the ones they use like statistical tests, correlations, or regression analysis to look for the association between those. But maybe it's good to have those studies more, and also maybe find different methods to identify the wasted food, like the what food skills and behaviors related to wasted food in household levels. So the methods can be different, and we can find different methods to examine those associations in the future.
Aisha,
So yeah,
Aisha, I just wanted to add that we did include qualitative studies, and
yes.
so those wouldn't have statistical associations between the wasted food and the food skills and behaviors, of course. But we were looking for these qualitative studies that mentioned
Hmm.
I saved this much food from the
Hmm.
activity or the skill or behavior that I engaged in.
Yeah,
So we did include those as well.
yeah, thank you. That was a great addition. Like yeah, that's true. We also wanted to understand, like like with surveys, you only can get like limited response or like limited insight, but the in interviews, like the qualitative study gives you more insight, like what people think, like why they do these kind of behaviors, or how did they get all these skills, or like all these kind of like valuable information around the topic.
Yeah. Okay, so after pulling together the research and providing a report to Hennepin County, about the scoping review, we also developed kind of a mock-up of an intervention or of a grant that could be moved forward. And so in this intervention, we had a few practice recommendations. And because a couple of the papers mentioned the motivation, ability, opportunity framework, MAO framework, as the theory-based framework that was used, we decided let's build off of that. And so then we took the high inhibitors, and we said let's build an intervention around those high inhibitors. And so that was simply creating a shopping list and utilizing a food inventory tracker. And then the emphasis could be on the improvement of meal planning and grocery shopping as for residents that they personally thought would help them reduce their food waste. And so this focus on high frequency generators and inhibitors would really help to focus the intervention, just like Aisha said, like which skills and behaviors do you focus on? There were so many of them. So really the idea is to kind of narrow it down so you know what will have an effect and one of these skills or behaviors will have the greatest effect. So we chose the impulse purchasing and bulk purchasing, so reducing that and increasing the use of a shopping list, increasing the use of food inventory management system, and then increasing the use of leftovers. And so if we look at this in terms of the motivation, ability, opportunity framework, we still see the personal and financial drivers as the motivation aspect of the framework. So in terms of the financial motivation, people who engaged in this intervention will track the specific costs of their wasted food items. This will encourage a reduction in household spending. And then the motivation here is the driver here for inventory-based shopping. So using some kind of tracker, whether it's an app on your phone or a paper version, those still work really well. Paper is great for keeping track of things, but the idea is to keep track and keep an inventory and keep an idea of what you have in your refrigerator and your cupboard. And then for in terms of the different types of outreach that could be done, you could have, and one thing we did find in the research was a family-centered approach. So including the whole family in this system, in your home management system, is really important because it teaches children to be involved and then to have behaviors that they can take into, their adulthood. And then participants are also encouraged to incorporate the family into every stage of food acquisition. So that might be hard for some families, going to a grocery store with, a toddler or let's say a 5 or 6-year-old that might be asking you for things they see in the supermarket all the time is difficult, but it's also, an important skill for both parents and kids to learn about, kind of that want versus need aspect of our purchasing behaviors. And the act of saying no is also an important skill for parents and caregivers to learn. So that's why we saw family-centered approaches mentioned often in the literature. And so the framework you see here on the bottom of this graphic, the motivation for the intervention is to reduce waste spending. And then the method for doing that is to track the costs of the wasted item. Think about how powerful that is if you're even weighing out something that, or estimating the weight of something that you have to throw away, and then estimating the cost of what that is. I'm wondering if any of you have ever done that when you threw something away or composted and thought, wow, I spent $5 on that and I am now throwing it away. And the ability part of this framework is to make the list for the food inventory using trackers to influence your shopping. And then the opportunity is the family involvement and creating some wasted food prevention learning sessions, whether they're online, through videos, through in person. You can determine that as you're developing your intervention. And we just made a couple mock-ups of what an inventory and shopping list might look like and what a food waste tracker might look like. So we really need to thank our partners in this endeavor. Of course, Jenny, for trusting in us over the time that it took for us to complete the scoping review. And then we had several students that helped us work on this research, students and interns, and they're all listed here. In fact, we even had an AmeriCorps member who worked with us. So Abby Walters and Allie Williams actually did their honors thesis on this research. So I really see the value in this Hennepin University partnership as not just for us to create new knowledge and generate research on important topics, but also helping to educate our college students who, when they get to be included in actual research projects, it opens their minds and you can see that happening as your research is moving along. So I'm going to hand it back over to Jenny, who's going to talk about next steps.
So good. Thank you so much, Aisha and Abby. It's been wonderful to see the results come out, and it's nothing necessarily groundbreaking, but that's actually the point, right? Like we knew these things in our guts of like doing this education for many years, but to see the research back it up, now we can feel more confident in going forward. And I love and we did find some things that some great examples that I didn't know about. So taking all of that and the motivation, ability, opportunities framework, we are using that as well. So we actually have a whole campaign to raise awareness about the value of your food. No one wants to waste food, by the way. Like I've never met in my career anyone that wants to waste food. And we know it's important, but really tying the money motivator to it is shown to increase the conversation. So maybe you don't get people talking about waste because, people have their opinions on waste or I compost everything, it's fine. But when you talk about you're wasting, the average family of four wastes $3,000 on food that they don't eat, like that's a big deal, especially with food prices, gas prices, everything. That's probably not going down anytime soon. So you can save money through not wasting food. But when we say that, we can raise awareness about that issue, but then actually giving the tools to help is where the county is hoping to come in. So we just shared in the chat our trashorcash.org campaign. So Trash or Cash is the campaign we have, but you'll see resources there very similar to what our research has created. So a meal planning personality quiz, because we don't all meal plan the same way, shockingly enough. And that'll lead you to think tools that will work for you. And then also a fridge, the fridge check Friday. So remembering to eat those leftovers, you'll get an email every Friday saying, "Hey, you should eat your food in your fridge. Take a moment, be mindful." And also, here's a fun tip of how to store cilantro to make it last the longest. So we have several things based on what we've known, but now we can say they're based on research and evidence-based tools. So our next big step is using all of this information to put time and funding behind meeting people where they are with their actual skills. Like we can provide tools, but we always need like a little guidance and for confidence, we know that bringing you along at your own pace is what matters and not being alone. So really getting in front of people with cooking classes, getting into schools with education about valuing food, and then based on the age, working them up to understanding how to prepare food and use food and store it right. And then also tabling, like the Mill City Farmers Market has wonderful cooking demos every Saturday, Sunday. So really taking what's already out there, but enhancing it or getting into more spaces in front of more eyes, in front of more people. Now we can really improve and expand those opportunities based on all of this research. We're already applying for grants based on this research, saying, "Hey, we know that this works. We need funding to expand it." So I'm so grateful for the work of Aisha and Abby and all the team, because this is really on the ground. Like we're using it already. So with that, I think our next slide is just if we have any questions.
Well, thank you so much to the whole research team. This has been very interesting. I simultaneously am fascinated about how much food and probably money my family wastes, and also somewhat don't want to know, but I know that I know that I should. So I'm on the Trash or Cash website. I'm very excited about that. We do have one question that's come in already, and then I want to open it up for attendees. Please feel free to add additional questions in the Q&A or the chat. I'll read aloud the one that we have, which is, were there any notable trends on wasted food and the age of users surveyed?
So should I, Abby? We created this table with some of the and the characteristics of the papers, like the ages of the participants, or like the gender, or like the objective, all these, like which country, all these kind of information and some findings. We didn't focus on the age trend when we examined the wasted food and the food skills and behaviors, but when I look at that table, like we can see like the ages of the participants were everywhere. Like a lot of studies use like wide age ranges, like for example, 18 to 60, or like 18 plus, or like 50 plus, or like there are a lot of like wide age ranges. But this is a great research question. Like maybe there is a study out there like examining those trends, but we didn't focus on it like specifically. We had studies all ages in general.
And I'll just add too, and this is outside of the scope of this survey
Yeah.
or this study, but what we see in the food waste world here is we do see parents with children are one of the main audiences that do waste a lot of food. If you have kids, you understand that completely. And then there are a little bit of the college age range, like early 20s, because you're newer into understanding those skills if you didn't get those in your high school. And then actually empty nesters, because you're now having to change. Your life has changed and you're having to relearn how to make less, which you'd think would be easy, but is not. So there is a national campaign that's going to start next February it'll be a national campaign for reducing wasted food. And the two main target audiences are parents with kids and young adults. So I believe that's 18 to 25. Don't quote me on that.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Another question in the chat is, do you have any data on what motivates residents the most in communication campaigns to participate in food recovery or recycling?
I can take that, but if you want to answer from the study point of view.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Yes, and we didn't look at because this was, of course, interventions that were
Yeah.
very hands-on. So this study didn't look at campaigns specifically, but
Yeah.
we know there are many other studies that have just looked at campaigns, including the what I just talked about of the national campaign. The last year, they've been looking at evidence-based campaigns across the country and the world of what does work. And I can say in my time as well, people tell us food or money is the biggest motivator, economics. They tell us that, but we also have a point of view of like, if that were completely true, then we would waste less because food is so expensive. So it's like consciously money is there, but subconsciously convenience and skills. So we usually based a lot of the work around across the country on money as the bring people in to talk about it, but then back it up with actually the skills and the environmental reasons and the other motivators.
Yeah.
I think one of the big takeaways from this scoping review was the few number of studies that we found that took place in the United States. It's amazing how many other countries around the world are actually looking at the question of wasted food. We saw a lot of studies from uh, Asia and from the Middle East and from Europe, but very few in the United States. And even when we started with those 7,000 studies and narrowed down to 50, um, even within the large number of studies initially, very few of them were from the United States. So what Jenny was saying about, okay, let's start testing some interventions across the country to see which ones work out the best, because we want to, put our scarce dollars to really good work. And that's where you have to really do some good evaluation of your interventions, which doesn't always happen because you're in the middle of doing an intervention rather than studying it and see if it's something that really works out. So there's my plug for good evaluation studies from the outset of any kind of effort that you're going to undertake, with possibly a control group.
Absolutely. So I haven't seen another question come in the chat. I really appreciate everybody's time. I'm going to put in the chat a feedback form for our audience. But I just want to say thank you again to our presenters for sharing your time and your research with us. And to our audience, thank you for joining us. If anybody has time to fill out this feedback form, HUP would love to know more about your experience. The link is in the chat. And I'll just end by saying a big thanks again to our presenters. This webinar was recorded, so folks can view it again in the future or share with anybody you think may be interested in the topic. And thank you for joining.